The ghost trailed me step by step, his presence pressing closer like a ticking clock. My lungs burned as I ran, every stride a countdown to the end. His scythe gleamed in the dim air, the final stroke ready to fall. I thought it was over until a flash tore the darkness apart. Steel met steel in midair, the deadly arc stopped cold. A towering man stood before me, muscles taut, eyes glowing with unyielding fire. His cloak whipped through the smoke as if he had risen from the storm itself. I gasped behind him, alive yet trembling. I was finishing a late class at the university and caught the last bus heading north through Pennsylvania. The ride was quiet except for the hum of the engine and the faint rustle of papers in my bag. I pressed my glasses back on my nose, my short hair brushing my cheeks as I leaned against the window. The bus slowed near an abandoned roadside shrine hidden by weeds. The driver muttered something and glanced nervously at the mirror. I felt uneasy when the lights flickered, shadows stretching across the aisle longer than they should. I tried to ignore it, but a cold breath slid down my neck. My eyes lifted toward the back seat where a figure sat alone. His skin was pale like wax, his eyes dark hollows that seemed to drip with black tears. Each blink of the bus lights showed him closer, his form slipping between seats without sound. My pulse hammered as I stood, gripping the metal bar. No one else noticed. The driver stared forward, frozen. My legs shook as the figure leaned forward, his breath leaving frost on the window beside me. I rushed toward the front, but the aisle stretched endlessly, as if I was running without moving. Seats warped, twisting into shapes I did not recognize. The man rose, his body drifting above the floor, his face melting into shifting shadows. I gasped, certain I would collapse, when the bus doors slammed open. A man stepped inside, tall and broad-shouldered, his shirt rolled at the sleeves. His eyes glowed faintly, holding a strength I could not explain. He planted himself between me and the ghost, his presence forcing the air to warm again. The phantom snarled, rushing forward, but the stranger raised an arm like a shield. Sparks of golden light flared in the stale air, holding the specter back. I stumbled into the nearest seat, clutching the edge, my breath ragged. Another passenger, a woman I had noticed earlier, gasped and gripped my shoulder. She whispered my name, though I never told her. The bus tilted, walls peeling away, and suddenly we were no longer on a road. I blinked against blinding light, finding myself among rows of wooden houses, firelight flickering in windows. My body trembled. The man stood tall, his boots on cobblestone now, his hands still raised as if bracing us against the phantom. People in strange clothing rushed past, their shouts sharp in the cold night. A wooden sign read Salem, 1692. My heart seized. The ghost's form wavered above the square, black tears dripping onto the dirt. My savior's jaw tightened as he prepared again to confront it. I clutched my glasses, struggling to breathe, knowing this place was not mine. Yet the nightmare had followed, chasing me into a century where survival meant something else. I never thought a simple bus ride would leave me trapped between centuries. That night stayed etched in my skin like frost that never melted. I can still feel the stale air of that bus, the humming lights above, the faces of strangers pretending not to notice the shifting shadow at the back. It was real, I know it, and yet part of me questions if anyone else saw him. My name is Julia, a graduate student, nothing remarkable except that I was wearing glasses and carrying too many books, and I somehow became the center of something I could not understand. The moment the figure rose from his seat, my chest locked. His eyes were pools of black, pulling everything into them, and when he drifted closer, it felt like every heartbeat was another second stolen from me. My legs moved on instinct, scraping against the narrow aisle, but the bus seemed to stretch like elastic, seats multiplying, windows bending into warped shapes. His whisper never reached my ears but landed directly in my bones. I knew he wanted me, only me, as if the others had faded into background noise. I remember pressing a hand against my chest, not sure if it was still beating. The bus stopped, not in the normal way, but with the doors snapping open into a wash of cold night. A man stepped inside. I had never seen him before. His presence filled the space immediately. Tall frame, shirt rolled at the arms, and a steadiness in his eyes that met the phantom head-on. He didn't flinch when the ghost lunged. He simply raised an arm, and in that instant the scythe of shadow froze in the air, sparks flaring like fireflies. Behind me, someone gasped, a young woman I hadn't even noticed until then. She clutched my arm as if she knew me. The floor shifted, the walls peeled, and with a violent pull, we were dragged out of the bus and into a place that reeked of old wood and smoke. My glasses nearly slipped off as I spun, trying to make sense of the cobblestones under my shoes. A wooden post loomed with a crude sign, Salem. I felt my breath stop, not because of the cold, but because I understood the year carved beneath, 1692. My skin prickled. People in rough clothes rushed past, shouting words I couldn't make out. Torches burned in hands, eyes darted with suspicion, and my stomach dropped when I realized where I had been pulled. The phantom was still there, his form weaving through the night air, his black tears spilling into the dirt road. The man who had saved me planted himself firmly between us. His eyes glowed faintly in the torchlight, a warning to the thing hovering before him. My body shivered, but the other woman tugged me toward the side of the street. She introduced herself as Hannah, but even then I doubted she belonged to my time. Her dress was heavy, her voice unsteady, and yet she seemed to know far more than me about what was unfolding. She whispered that the ghost had followed me here for a reason. I didn't want to hear it. My knees felt weak, my breath short, and the chaos of shouts from the townspeople only pressed harder against my ears. They looked at us strangely, muttering words that tasted of judgment. I had read enough history to know what happened here in this century. Accusations of witchcraft hung like smoke, and I realized with a chill that I must have appeared suspicious to them already. My hair cut short, my glasses glinting, my clothes too modern, everything about me screamed of something unnatural. The thought twisted in my mind that perhaps the ghost had dragged me here to finish me in a place where no one would ever question his right to take me. The man protecting me moved suddenly, drawing the ghost further down the street, away from the cluster of villagers. His strength was unreal, the way he deflected each strike of that shadowed scythe with nothing but raw force and some strange light that flared from his skin. I stayed back with Hannah, who gripped my arm tightly. She said we had to keep moving, that the town was no place for us to linger. I nodded, too shaken to argue. Yet even as we tried to slip into the crowd, I could feel the phantom's gaze pierce through every distraction, locked on me with unyielding hunger. We ducked beneath a low roof, hiding near barrels stacked by a wooden fence. My hands trembled so much I nearly dropped my books. Hannah steadied me, whispering that she too had been pulled once before, that she never made it back. Her words hit like cold water, though part of me refused to accept them. I told myself this couldn't last, that I would wake, that buses didn't dissolve into centuries-old streets. But the dirt beneath my shoes, the smell of smoke, the cries of villagers chasing supposed witches, all of it pressed against me too vividly to deny. The clash continued in the distance, each sound echoing like thunder against the wooden walls. I closed my eyes, praying the stranger would not falter, praying I would have one more chance to breathe without the phantom shadow curling around me. My life felt like it hung on the thread of a man whose name I did not even know. And when the torches of the townsfolk turned down the street toward us, Hannah pulled me tighter against the fence. The ghost might have been our greatest threat, but here, in this place, I was beginning to realize that the living could be just as dangerous. I thought hiding behind that wooden fence would give me a moment to breathe, but the air itself felt too heavy to swallow. My palms were raw from gripping the barrel, my books pressed tight against my chest, as if they could protect me from forces I didn't understand. Hannah whispered that we shouldn't stay too long, her voice trembling, though she tried to make it sound steady. I could see fear hiding in her eyes, the kind that comes from knowing a truth you don't want to share. The stranger who shielded me earlier was still fighting, his frame steady even as the phantom twisted and shifted like smoke against the wind. The townspeople gathered with torches, their shouts mixing with the hiss of fire, but none dared get too close. It was as if they sensed something unearthly but couldn't name it, so they fell back on suspicion. Their stares lingered on me, on my clothes, on the strange objects I carried, and I knew I was already marked. Hannah tugged at my sleeve, urging me to move deeper into the maze of narrow streets. We passed through alleys that smelled of ash and damp earth, Every door seemed half open, every window held a pair of suspicious eyes. A boy stepped into our path, no older than 12, with dark hair and a gaze too sharp for someone his age. He didn't speak, just looked at me as if he could see past the surface, into the hollow place where my panic was echoing. Hannah pulled me forward, muttering his name under her breath. Thomas, and I caught a glimpse of something like sorrow in her face. She knew him, but she didn't stop. The road curved sharply, and I felt the ground tilt beneath me. A dizziness spread through my head, the kind that makes you question whether you're standing on solid earth or on the edge of another time about to pull you in. My body wanted to collapse, but Hannah steadied me. She explained quickly, breathless, that people like us were not meant to stay visible. I wanted to ask what she meant, but the words stuck in my throat. My mind kept circling back to the stranger who had stood against the phantom. Who was he, and why did he choose to save me? The sound of footsteps made us stop. From the corner of a barn appeared another woman, her long hair tied in braids, her dress simple but worn from years of labor. Her name slipped from Hannah's lips, Eliza. She looked at me with suspicion, then softened as if she recognized the same lost fear in my eyes that she once carried. Eliza told us quickly that the town was restless tonight, that the council would come searching. She urged us to hide in her cottage by the edge of the field, away from the gathering flames. I followed, though every step felt like walking deeper into a story I had no script for. Inside her cottage, the walls were lined with herbs and dried flowers. The air smelled sharp, almost medicinal, but comforting in a strange way. I set my books down, finally letting my arms relax, though my shoulders ached. Eliza poured water into a cup, placing it in front of me without asking questions. I wanted to drink, but my hands were trembling too much to lift it. Hannah sat close, whispering again about the phantom, about how it only clings to those it marks. Her eyes flickered toward me, and I felt my chest tighten. Marked. Was that what I was now? Before I could respond, a crack split the night air outside. The ground quivered as if something massive had landed nearby. We rushed to the window, and there he was, the stranger. His form glowed faintly, not in a way that blinded, but in a way that seemed to push back the darkness itself. The phantom hovered above him, restless, shifting between shapes, searching for a way through. I pressed my hand to the window pane, the glass cool against my skin, and whispered silently a hope that he would not fall. The cottage shook, dust falling from the beams above. Eliza told us to stay hidden, but Hannah pulled me back toward the door. She said the stranger needed us, that running would not free me from what had already begun. I wanted to scream that I was not meant for this, that I was just a girl with too many books and a late bus ride. Yet something inside me, small but persistent, told me she was right. If I kept running, the phantom would follow forever. We stepped outside, the field stretching under a silver moon. The air pulsed with energy, the kind that makes every hair on your arm stand tall. The stranger turned his head slightly, just enough to show he knew we were there. His eyes caught mine for the briefest moment, and I felt a strange calm, as if his strength alone could anchor me in this century I didn't belong to. The phantom twisted again, letting out a sound like wind rushing through hollow wood. The battle was not over, but for the first time I felt I wasn't entirely powerless. I don't know how long we stood there, suspended between fear and resolve, but in that moment I understood something. This wasn't just about survival. It was about unraveling why I had been dragged here, why Hannah never returned, why Eliza lived in shadows, and why a stranger risked himself for me without ever saying a word. The answers lingered just out of reach, but I could sense them circling closer, waiting for me to step into the unknown. I kept hearing the echo of my own heartbeat, louder than the distant shouts from the village. The night air wrapped around me, heavy with dew and something stranger, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Hannah stayed close, her hand tight on my wrist, while Eliza lingered behind us, her eyes sharp, measuring every shadow like they could betray us. The stranger stood farther out in the field, his presence both calming and terrifying at once. The phantom circled him, moving in ways that bent the air, twisting shapes that the mind could barely follow. My body wanted to turn away, yet my gaze refused to leave. For a second, his eyes caught mine again, and it was enough to remind me I wasn't just a witness. Somehow I was a piece of this puzzle. We moved closer to the barn for cover, the ground damp beneath our steps. Eliza warned that the council might already be searching, and if they found me here, it would not be out of kindness. She said little, but every word landed with weight. Hannah looked torn, wanting to believe there was safety somewhere, yet knowing deep down there wasn't. Her face showed it all. Fear, doubt, a flicker of trust in me she couldn't explain. Inside the barn, the air smelled of hay and old wood. I leaned against a beam, trying to steady my breathing. Hannah pressed her palms together as if praying, while Eliza kept peering through a crack in the wall. None of us spoke for long minutes. Outside, the battle of silence and shadows continued. The stranger unshaken, the phantom shifting like a storm cloud waiting for the right strike. My legs trembled with the urge to run, but the barn felt like both prison and sanctuary. When the sound of footsteps approached, every nerve in me snapped alert. A tall man entered, his hair tangled from the wind, his expression unreadable. He looked directly at me first, then at Hannah, then finally at Eliza, as though weighing who among us could be trusted. His name was murmured softly, Daniel. He carried no light, no weapon, yet he seemed certain of his place here. He asked in a calm tone why I had come, though it was less a question and more a statement, as if he already knew the answer. I wanted to explain, but words stumbled out awkwardly. I told him I didn't choose this, that one moment I was in my own world, and the next I was here, with no way back. His expression didn't change, but there was a faint flicker in his eyes, a recognition perhaps, or maybe pity. Hannah pressed her hand to my shoulder, quietly asking him if the stranger outside could truly hold the phantom back forever. Daniel shook his head once, slow, certain. No one could hold it forever. Eliza broke the silence then, saying that we had to decide whether to hide or to face it. Her tone carried authority, and for the first time I sensed that she wasn't just another villager. She knew more than she admitted, and she was testing me. My chest tightened. Why me? Why not her, or Hannah, or Daniel? Why was I suddenly the center of this spiral? The questions burned but remained unspoken. The barn walls rattled suddenly, dust falling from the beams. A low hum filled the air, a sound that seemed to vibrate in my bones. I looked through the crack where Eliza stood moments earlier and saw the phantom drawing closer, pressing against the stranger with a weight that bent the grass flat. He still stood, still glowing faintly, though strain showed in his stance. My instinct screamed to go, to run until the fields ended, but another part of me knew distance would change nothing. Daniel stepped forward, kneeling down so his eyes were level with mine. He spoke quietly, saying that those who arrive from elsewhere are never chosen by chance. His words felt carved in stone, final. Hannah looked at me then with the same expression she had back when she first pulled me away. Fear, yes, but also belief. Eliza waited silently, as though she too had been waiting for this truth to surface. I swallowed hard, not ready, but unwilling to deny what had already taken hold. We left the barn together, the four of us moving toward the field. The night had grown colder, the moon sliding behind thin clouds, turning everything silver gray. Each step I took felt heavier than the last, yet I didn't stop. The stranger glanced at us once, his eyes shadowed but steady, then turned back to the phantom. It was waiting, its form stretched wide, its edges fraying into the air like smoke unraveling. I couldn't see a face, only movement that suggested intent. The closer we drew, the more my chest burned with dread. Yet hidden beneath it was something I hadn't expected, resolve. The kind that comes not from courage, but from the knowledge that there was no longer a choice. Hannah whispered words I didn't catch. Eliza tightened her grip on my arm, and Daniel's silence was like a steady drumbeat guiding us forward. For once, I felt less like a lost intruder and more like someone who might matter in this story. I don't know what tomorrow will bring, or if there will even be a tomorrow in this place. But as I stood on the edge of the field, the grass bending in strange patterns around us, I realized that fear had shifted. It was no longer only about survival. It was about discovery, about uncovering why I had been pulled here, and what part of me this phantom wanted. The answers were near, though none of us could predict the cost. The night carried a weight that pressed into my skin, like the air itself had grown thicker. I never thought silence could sound so loud, every breath echoing in my head. Hannah walked beside me, glancing over her shoulder more than she looked ahead, while Eliza moved with a determination that made me wonder if she had known all along where this road would lead. Daniel stayed quiet, keeping a steady pace at the back, his eyes shifting between the fields and the distant glow near the forest line. He gave nothing away, not fear, not confidence, just a strange steadiness that made me uneasy. I envied him for that, because every step I took seemed heavier than the last, as if the earth itself wanted me to stop. My thoughts spun in circles, trying to make sense of why I had been thrown into this place at all. The path narrowed, lined with tall grass that moved like restless waves. I tried to distract myself by focusing on simple details. The way Hannah's braids swung with each hurried step, the faint sound of Eliza's boots brushing against the gravel, the cold air that stung my throat. Yet even those details reminded me this wasn't home, that I didn't belong here. Every sound felt unfamiliar, every shadow seemed to breathe. At one point Hannah stumbled, and I caught her before she fell. Her hand was trembling, not from weakness but from fear she didn't want to admit. Eliza shot me a sharp look, as though helping her had broken some unspoken rule. For a moment tension rose between us, quiet but heavy, until Daniel's voice cut through. He told us to keep moving, that hesitation was a gift we couldn't afford. His words weren't harsh, but they left no room for doubt. The forest ahead looked alive in its stillness. Branches tangled above, swallowing the moonlight, leaving only faint glimmers that slipped through. I hesitated at the edge, my chest tight, while the others stepped forward without pause. It felt wrong, like crossing a line I wouldn't be able to step back from. But I followed anyway, because the thought of being left behind felt worse than what waited inside. Inside, the air was colder, carrying a dampness that clung to my skin. The ground was soft, littered with leaves that muffled our steps. Every few feet, Eliza stopped, scanning as if expecting something to leap from the shadows. Hannah whispered that she felt watched, her voice shaking. I wanted to tell her she wasn't alone in that, but the words caught in my throat. Some feelings don't need repeating when everyone shares them. The silence broke with a low hum, faint at first, like distant singing carried through the trees. I froze, my stomach twisting. The sound wasn't threatening, yet it unsettled me in ways I couldn't name. Daniel tilted his head as if he recognized it, though he said nothing. Eliza frowned, her eyes narrowing, while Hannah gripped my arm tighter. I tried to listen closer, but the more I focused, the less human it sounded. As we walked deeper, the forest opened into a clearing where the ground shimmered faintly under the moonlight. At the center stood a figure cloaked in shadows, taller than any of us, unmoving like a statue. My breath hitched, my mind racing with the memory of the phantom from the field. But this felt different. This presence wasn't storm-like chaos. It was calm, deliberate, almost patient. My skin prickled, and for a moment I thought about turning back, yet my feet carried me forward. The figure spoke, not with words I could understand, but with a tone that resonated through the air. Daniel answered, his voice low but steady, as if he had been waiting for this encounter. I couldn't understand either of them, yet I felt each sound like vibrations inside my chest. Hannah clung closer, Eliza watched with a guarded intensity, and I stood there caught between fear and fascination. The exchange ended as abruptly as it began. The figure turned its head, and though I couldn't see its face, I felt its focus shift directly to me. Heat rose in my chest, not from embarrassment, but from a strange pull I couldn't resist. My legs moved before I could think, carrying me a step closer. Eliza caught my wrist sharply, pulling me back. Her eyes flashed with something between anger and fear. She hissed that I didn't know what I was walking into. But that was the truth. None of us knew. The forest seemed to hold secrets in every root, every shadow. The presence lingered even after the figure faded into the darkness, as if it had left a mark that couldn't be erased. My heart was still racing when Daniel finally turned to us, saying it wasn't finished. His voice carried the weight of certainty, but also a warning. Hannah's face paled. Eliza clenched her fists, and I felt the chill of knowing that whatever this was, it had only just begun. We stood in silence for a long moment before moving again. The path deeper into the forest waited, winding like a trail of unanswered questions. Every instinct told me to resist, yet something inside urged me forward, whispering that the answers I feared were the very ones I needed most. The ghost trailed me step by step, his presence pressing closer like a ticking clock. My lungs burned as I ran, every stride a countdown to the end. His scythe gleamed in the dim air, the final stroke ready to fall. I thought it was over until a flash tore the darkness apart. Steel met steel in midair, the deadly arc stopped cold. A towering man stood before me, muscles taut, eyes glowing with unyielding fire. His cloak whipped through the smoke as if he had risen from the storm itself. I gasped behind him, alive yet trembling. I was finishing a late class at the university and caught the last bus heading north through Pennsylvania. The ride was quiet except for the hum of the engine and the faint rustle of papers in my bag. I pressed my glasses back on my nose, my short hair brushing my cheeks as I leaned against the window. The bus slowed near an abandoned roadside shrine hidden by weeds. The driver muttered something and glanced nervously at the mirror. I felt uneasy when the lights flickered, shadows stretching across the aisle longer than they should. I tried to ignore it, but a cold breath slid down my neck. My eyes lifted toward the back seat where a figure sat alone. His skin was pale like wax, his eyes dark hollows that seemed to drip with black tears. Each blink of the bus lights showed him closer, his form slipping between seats without sound. My pulse hammered as I stood, gripping the metal bar. No one else noticed. The driver stared forward, frozen. My legs shook as the figure leaned forward, his breath leaving frost on the window beside me. I rushed toward the front, but the aisle stretched endlessly, as if I was running without moving. Seats warped, twisting into shapes I did not recognize. The man rose, his body drifting above the floor, his face melting into shifting shadows. I gasped, certain I would collapse, when the bus doors slammed open. A man stepped inside, tall and broad-shouldered, his shirt rolled at the sleeves. His eyes glowed faintly, holding a strength I could not explain. He planted himself between me and the ghost, his presence forcing the air to warm again. The phantom snarled, rushing forward, but the stranger raised an arm like a shield. Sparks of golden light flared in the stale air, holding the specter back. I stumbled into the nearest seat, clutching the edge, my breath ragged. Another passenger, a woman I had noticed earlier, gasped and gripped my shoulder. She whispered my name, though I never told her. The bus tilted, walls peeling away, and suddenly we were no longer on a road. I blinked against blinding light, finding myself among rows of wooden houses, firelight flickering in windows. My body trembled. The man stood tall, his boots on cobblestone now, his hands still raised as if bracing us against the phantom. People in strange clothing rushed past, their shouts sharp in the cold night. A wooden sign read Salem, 1692. My heart seized. The ghost's form wavered above the square, black tears dripping onto the dirt. My savior's jaw tightened as he prepared again to confront it. I clutched my glasses, struggling to breathe, knowing this place was not mine. Yet the nightmare had followed, chasing me into a century where survival meant something else. I never thought a simple bus ride would leave me trapped between centuries. That night stayed etched in my skin like frost that never melted. I can still feel the stale air of that bus, the humming lights above, the faces of strangers pretending not to notice the shifting shadow at the back. It was real, I know it, and yet part of me questions if anyone else saw him. My name is Julia, a graduate student, nothing remarkable except that I was wearing glasses and carrying too many books, and I somehow became the center of something I could not understand. The moment the figure rose from his seat, my chest locked. His eyes were pools of black, pulling everything into them, and when he drifted closer, it felt like every heartbeat was another second stolen from me. My legs moved on instinct, scraping against the narrow aisle, but the bus seemed to stretch like elastic. Seats multiplying, windows bending into warped shapes. His whisper never reached my ears but landed directly in my bones. I knew he wanted me, only me, as if the others had faded into background noise. I remember pressing a hand against my chest, not sure if it was still beating. The bus stopped, not in the normal way, but with the doors snapping open into a wash of cold night. A man stepped inside. I had never seen him before. His presence filled the space immediately. Tall frame, shirt rolled at the arms, and a steadiness in his eyes that met the phantom head-on. He didn't flinch when the ghost lunged. He simply raised an arm, and in that instant the scythe of shadow froze in the air, sparks flaring like fireflies. Behind me someone gasped, a young woman I hadn't even noticed until then. She clutched my arm as if she knew me. The floor shifted, the walls peeled, and with a violent pull we were dragged out of the bus and into a place that reeked of old wood and smoke. My glasses nearly slipped off as I spun, trying to make sense of the cobblestones under my shoes. A wooden post loomed with a crude sign, Salem. I felt my breath stop, not because of the cold, but because I understood the year carved beneath, 1692. My skin prickled. People in rough clothes rushed past, shouting words I couldn't make out. Torches burned in hands, eyes darted with suspicion, and my stomach dropped when I realized where I had been pulled. The phantom was still there, his form weaving through the night air, his black tears spilling into the dirt road. The man who had saved me planted himself firmly between us. His eyes glowed faintly in the torchlight, a warning to the thing hovering before him. My body shivered, but the other woman tugged me toward the side of the street. She introduced herself as Hannah, but even then I doubted she belonged to my time. Her dress was heavy, her voice unsteady, and yet she seemed to know far more than me about what was unfolding. She whispered that the ghost had followed me here for a reason. I didn't want to hear it. My knees felt weak, my breath short, and the chaos of shouts from the townspeople only pressed harder against my ears. They looked at us strangely, muttering words that tasted of judgment. I had read enough history to know what happened here in this century. Accusations of witchcraft hung like smoke, and I realized with a chill that I must have appeared suspicious to them already. My hair cut short, my glasses glinting, my clothes too modern, everything about me screamed of something unnatural. The thought twisted in my mind that perhaps the ghost had dragged me here to finish me in a place where no one would ever question his right to take me. The man protecting me moved suddenly, drawing the ghost further down the street, away from the cluster of villagers. His strength was unreal, the way he deflected each strike of that shadowed scythe with nothing but raw force and some strange light that flared from his skin. I stayed back with Hannah, who gripped my arm tightly. She said we had to keep moving, that the town was no place for us to linger. I nodded, too shaken to argue. Yet even as we tried to slip into the crowd, I could feel the phantom's gaze pierce through every distraction, locked on me with unyielding hunger. We ducked beneath a low roof, hiding near barrels stacked by a wooden fence. My hands trembled so much I nearly dropped my books. Hannah steadied me, whispering that she too had been pulled once before, that she never made it back. Her words hit like cold water, though part of me refused to accept them. I told myself this couldn't last, that I would wake, that buses didn't dissolve into centuries-old streets. But the dirt beneath my shoes, the smell of smoke, the cries of villagers chasing supposed witches, all of it pressed against me too vividly to deny. The clash continued in the distance, each sound echoing like thunder against the wooden walls. I closed my eyes, praying the stranger would not falter, praying I would have one more chance to breathe without the phantom shadow curling around me. My life felt like it hung on the thread of a man whose name I did not even know. And when the torches of the townsfolk turned down the street toward us, Hannah pulled me tighter against the fence. The ghost might have been our greatest threat, but here, in this place, I was beginning to realize that the living could be just as dangerous. I thought hiding behind that wooden fence would give me a moment to breathe, but the air itself felt too heavy to swallow. My palms were raw from gripping the barrel, my books pressed tight against my chest as if they could protect me from forces I didn't understand. Hannah whispered that we shouldn't stay too long, her voice trembling, though she tried to make it sound steady. I could see fear hiding in her eyes, the kind that comes from knowing a truth you don't want to share. The stranger who shielded me earlier was still fighting, his frame steady even as the phantom twisted and shifted like smoke against the wind. The townspeople gathered with torches, their shouts mixing with the hiss of fire, but none dared get too close. It was as if they sensed something unearthly but couldn't name it, so they fell back on suspicion. Their stares lingered on me, on my clothes, on the strange objects I carried, and I knew I was already marked. Hannah tugged at my sleeve, urging me to move deeper into the maze of narrow streets. We passed through alleys that smelled of ash and damp earth. Every door seemed half open, every window held a pair of suspicious eyes. A boy stepped into our path, no older than 12, with dark hair and a gaze too sharp for someone his age. He didn't speak, just looked at me as if he could see past the surface, into the hollow place where my panic was echoing. Hannah pulled me forward, muttering his name under her breath. Thomas, and I caught a glimpse of something like sorrow in her face. She knew him, but she didn't stop. The road curved sharply, and I felt the ground tilt beneath me. A dizziness spread through my head, the kind that makes you question whether you're standing on solid earth or on the edge of another time about to pull you in. My body wanted to collapse, but Hannah steadied me. She explained quickly, breathless, that people like us were not meant to stay visible. I wanted to ask what she meant, but the words stuck in my throat. My mind kept circling back to the stranger who had stood against the phantom. Who was he, and why did he choose to save me? The sound of footsteps made us stop. From the corner of a barn appeared another woman, her long hair tied in braids, her dress simple but worn from years of labor. Her name slipped from Hannah's lips, Eliza. She looked at me with suspicion, then softened as if she recognized the same lost fear in my eyes that she once carried. Eliza told us quickly that the town was restless tonight, that the council would come searching. She urged us to hide in her cottage by the edge of the field, away from the gathering flames. I followed, though every step felt like walking deeper into a story I had no script for. Inside her cottage, the walls were lined with herbs and dried flowers. The air smelled sharp, almost medicinal, but comforting in a strange way. I set my books down, finally letting my arms relax, though my shoulders ached. Eliza poured water into a cup, placing it in front of me without asking questions. I wanted to drink, but my hands were trembling too much to lift it. Hannah sat close, whispering again about the phantom, about how it only clings to those it marks. Her eyes flickered toward me, and I felt my chest tighten. Marked. Was that what I was now? Before I could respond, a crack split the night air outside. The ground quivered as if something massive had landed nearby. We rushed to the window, and there he was, the stranger. His form glowed faintly, not in a way that blinded, but in a way that seemed to push back the darkness itself. The phantom hovered above him, restless, shifting between shapes, searching for a way through. I pressed my hand to the window pane, the glass cool against my skin, and whispered silently a hope that he would not fall. The cottage shook, dust falling from the beams above. Eliza told us to stay hidden, but Hannah pulled me back toward the door. She said the stranger needed us, that running would not free me from what had already begun. I wanted to scream that I was not meant for this, that I was just a girl with too many books and a late bus ride. Yet something inside me, small but persistent, told me she was right. If I kept running, the phantom would follow forever. We stepped outside, the field stretching under a silver moon. The air pulsed with energy, the kind that makes every hair on your arm stand tall. The stranger turned his head slightly, just enough to show he knew we were there. His eyes caught mine for the briefest moment, and I felt a strange calm, as if his strength alone could anchor me in this century I didn't belong to. The phantom twisted again, letting out a sound like wind rushing through hollow wood. The battle was not over, but for the first time I felt I wasn't entirely powerless. I don't know how long we stood there, suspended between fear and resolve, but in that moment, I understood something. This wasn't just about survival. It was about unraveling why I had been dragged here, why Hannah never returned, why Eliza lived in shadows, and why a stranger risked himself for me without ever saying a word. The answers lingered just out of reach, but I could sense them circling closer, waiting for me to step into the unknown. I kept hearing the echo of my own heartbeat, louder than the distant shouts from the village. The night air wrapped around me, heavy with dew and something stranger, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Hannah stayed close, her hand tight on my wrist, while Eliza lingered behind us, her eyes sharp, measuring every shadow like they could betray us. The stranger stood farther out in the field, his presence both calming and terrifying at once. The phantom circled him, moving in ways that bent the air, twisting shapes that the mind could barely follow. My body wanted to turn away, yet my gaze refused to leave. For a second, his eyes caught mine again, and it was enough to remind me I wasn't just a witness. Somehow I was a piece of this puzzle. We moved closer to the barn for cover, the ground damp beneath our steps. Eliza warned that the council might already be searching, and if they found me here, it would not be out of kindness. She said little, but every word landed with weight. Hannah looked torn, wanting to believe there was safety somewhere, yet knowing deep down there wasn't. Her face showed it all. Fear, doubt, a flicker of trust in me she couldn't explain. Inside the barn, the air smelled of hay and old wood. I leaned against a beam, trying to steady my breathing. Hannah pressed her palms together as if praying, while Eliza kept peering through a crack in the wall. None of us spoke for long minutes. Outside, the battle of silence and shadows continued. The stranger unshaken, the phantom shifting like a storm cloud waiting for the right strike. My legs trembled with the urge to run, but the barn felt like both prison and sanctuary. When the sound of footsteps approached, every nerve in me snapped alert. A tall man entered, his hair tangled from the wind, his expression unreadable. He looked directly at me first, then at Hannah, then finally at Eliza, as though weighing who among us could be trusted. His name was murmured softly, Daniel. He carried no light, no weapon, yet he seemed certain of his place here. He asked in a calm tone why I had come, though it was less a question and more a statement, as if he already knew the answer. I wanted to explain, but words stumbled out awkwardly. I told him I didn't choose this, that one moment I was in my own world, and the next I was here, with no way back. His expression didn't change, but there was a faint flicker in his eyes, a recognition perhaps, or maybe pity. Hannah pressed her hand to my shoulder, quietly asking him if the stranger outside could truly hold the phantom back forever. Daniel shook his head once, slow, certain. No one could hold it forever. Eliza broke the silence then, saying that we had to decide whether to hide or to face it. Her tone carried authority, and for the first time I sensed that she wasn't just another villager. She knew more than she admitted, and she was testing me. My chest tightened. Why me? Why not her, or Hannah, or Daniel? Why was I suddenly the center of this spiral? The questions burned but remained unspoken. The barn walls rattled suddenly, dust falling from the beams. A low hum filled the air, a sound that seemed to vibrate in my bones. I looked through the crack where Eliza stood moments earlier and saw the phantom drawing closer, pressing against the stranger with a weight that bent the grass flat. He still stood, still glowing faintly, though strain showed in his stance. My instinct screamed to go, to run until the fields ended, but another part of me knew distance would change nothing. Daniel stepped forward, kneeling down so his eyes were level with mine. He spoke quietly, saying that those who arrive from elsewhere are never chosen by chance. His words felt carved in stone, final. Hannah looked at me then with the same expression she had back when she first pulled me away. Fear, yes, but also belief. Eliza waited silently, as though she too had been waiting for this truth to surface. I swallowed hard, not ready, but unwilling to deny what had already taken hold. We left the barn together, the four of us moving toward the field. The night had grown colder, the moon sliding behind thin clouds, turning everything silver gray. Each step I took felt heavier than the last, yet I didn't stop. The stranger glanced at us once, his eyes shadowed but steady, then turned back to the phantom. It was waiting, its form stretched wide, its edges fraying into the air like smoke unraveling. I couldn't see a face, only movement that suggested intent. The closer we drew, the more my chest burned with dread. Yet hidden beneath it was something I hadn't expected, resolve. The kind that comes not from courage, but from the knowledge that there was no longer a choice. Hannah whispered words I didn't catch. Eliza tightened her grip on my arm, and Daniel's silence was like a steady drumbeat guiding us forward. For once, I felt less like a lost intruder and more like someone who might matter in this story. I don't know what tomorrow will bring, or if there will even be a tomorrow in this place. But as I stood on the edge of the field, the grass bending in strange patterns around us, I realized that fear had shifted. It was no longer only about survival. It was about discovery, about uncovering why I had been pulled here, and what part of me this phantom wanted. The answers were near, though none of us could predict the cost. The night carried a weight that pressed into my skin, like the air itself had grown thicker. I never thought silence could sound so loud, every breath echoing in my head. Hannah walked beside me, glancing over her shoulder more than she looked ahead, while Eliza moved with a determination that made me wonder if she had known all along where this road would lead. Daniel stayed quiet, keeping a steady pace at the back, his eyes shifting between the fields and the distant glow near the forest line. He gave nothing away, not fear, not confidence, just a strange steadiness that made me uneasy. I envied him for that, because every step I took seemed heavier than the last, as if the earth itself wanted me to stop. My thoughts spun in circles, trying to make sense of why I had been thrown into this place at all. The path narrowed, lined with tall grass that moved like restless waves. I tried to distract myself by focusing on simple details, the way Hannah's braids swung with each hurried step, the faint sound of Eliza's boots brushing against the gravel, the cold air that stung my throat. Yet even those details reminded me this wasn't home, that I didn't belong here. Every sound felt unfamiliar, every shadow seemed to breathe. At one point Hannah stumbled, and I caught her before she fell. Her hand was trembling, not from weakness but from fear she didn't want to admit. Eliza shot me a sharp look, as though helping her had broken some unspoken rule. For a moment tension rose between us, quiet but heavy, until Daniel's voice cut through. He told us to keep moving, that hesitation was a gift we couldn't afford. His words weren't harsh, but they left no room for doubt. The forest ahead looked alive in its stillness. Branches tangled above, swallowing the moonlight, leaving only faint glimmers that slipped through. I hesitated at the edge, my chest tight, while the others stepped forward without pause. It felt wrong, like crossing a line I wouldn't be able to step back from. But I followed anyway, because the thought of being left behind felt worse than what waited inside. Inside, the air was colder, carrying a dampness that clung to my skin. The ground was soft, littered with leaves that muffled our steps. Every few feet, Eliza stopped, scanning as if expecting something to leap from the shadows. Hannah whispered that she felt watched, her voice shaking. I wanted to tell her she wasn't alone in that, but the words caught in my throat. Some feelings don't need repeating when everyone shares them. The silence broke with a low hum, faint at first, like distant singing carried through the trees. I froze, my stomach twisting. The sound wasn't threatening, yet it unsettled me in ways I couldn't name. Daniel tilted his head as if he recognized it, though he said nothing. Eliza frowned, her eyes narrowing, while Hannah gripped my arm tighter. I tried to listen closer, but the more I focused, the less human it sounded. As we walked deeper, the forest opened into a clearing where the ground shimmered faintly under the moonlight. At the center stood a figure cloaked in shadows, taller than any of us, unmoving like a statue. My breath hitched, my mind racing with the memory of the phantom from the field. But this felt different. This presence wasn't storm-like chaos. It was calm, deliberate, almost patient. My skin prickled, and for a moment I thought about turning back, yet my feet carried me forward. The figure spoke, not with words I could understand, but with a tone that resonated through the air. Daniel answered, his voice low but steady, as if he had been waiting for this encounter. I couldn't understand either of them, yet I felt each sound like vibrations inside my chest. Hannah clung closer, Eliza watched with a guarded intensity, and I stood there caught between fear and fascination. The exchange ended as abruptly as it began. The figure turned its head, and though I couldn't see its face, I felt its focus shift directly to me. Heat rose in my chest, not from embarrassment, but from a strange pull I couldn't resist. My legs moved before I could think, carrying me a step closer. Eliza caught my wrist sharply, pulling me back. Her eyes flashed with something between anger and fear. She hissed that I didn't know what I was walking into. But that was the truth. None of us knew. The forest seemed to hold secrets in every root, every shadow. The presence lingered even after the figure faded into the darkness, as if it had left a mark that couldn't be erased. My heart was still racing when Daniel finally turned to us, saying it wasn't finished. His voice carried the weight of certainty, but also a warning. Hannah's face paled, Eliza clenched her fists, and I felt the chill of knowing that whatever this was, it had only just begun. We stood in silence for a long moment before moving again. The path deeper into the forest waited, winding like a trail of unanswered questions. Every instinct told me to resist, yet something inside urged me forward, whispering that the answers I feared were the very ones I needed most.